Well, hello everybody. This is Danny from Deep South Homestead. Yes, it's a beautiful morning. It is 71 degrees this morning. I mean, guys, I'm looking out. The mulberry trees are leafed out. There's mulberries hanging all over them. Pear trees are all leafed out. Blooms, I mean, they look like snow. They're so white. Peach trees have already bloomed. There's little peaches on them everywhere. Huckleberries has got huckleberries on them everywhere. The apple trees are beginning to bloom out. In my high tunnel, all my peach trees are blooming out. I mean, guys, the pomegranate trees all leafed out over there. Got little pomegranates fixing to start blooming. It's amazing. The grass is turning green. I'm looking at the cows out here in the pasture. They're just eating on the green grass, enjoying it. Mayhaw trees already bloomed out, got leaves on them. It is amazing. The neighbors are out on their tractors this morning. It sounds like what farm life is supposed to be in the spring. I'm sitting here to see the pond. I see swirls and ripples all in the water everywhere. The fish are feeding on the little tadpoles in the water. The bullgrass is starting to come up in the edge of the water, which tells me it's 60 degrees. And time for the fish to start bedding now. If they're going to bed, the young brim and stuff in there. The bass and all, and guys, it's a beautiful day. Light breeze blowing. I hand plowed the potatoes all this morning with the Hoss Tool high arch wheel hoe. They're not quite big enough to use a tractor on yet. So I went in, and while the plants are about 6 inches high, I kind of pulled a little dirt to them with the Hoss tool. That'll leave me a little trench down beside them now. When they get larger, I'll be able to come in and pour some fertilizer down through there, and I'll be able to bed them up with a big tractor and leave them alone. I won't have to touch them no more. Wanda and I have been sitting down at the pier this morning discussing, future goals, what we want to do, our next projects, these types of things. It's just, it's what we desire the most, And with that being said, it kind of brought up a subject between Wanda and I about our homestead here. It's and we talk about what our desires are for our homestead here, and that is creating an ecosystem. And that's something that you don't hardly ever hear anybody talk about. You do hear some about permaculture, and permaculture is part of an ecosystem. But I hope the wind's not too bad, guys, because the wind just started blowing. That's March for you in the Deep South. But in the ecosystem, where one thing hinges on another thing, kind of like permaculture works a little bit in that way, but it's really nice when you have a true ecosystem working. And that's our goal here, is so that one thing takes care of another thing. We were sitting here talking this morning about, my spaghetti squash are already up this tall. This coming week they got to go in the ground. And we kind of brought to our attention all the vegetable scraps that we have this year. We don't have any more pigs or anything. And this last year we didn't have any pigs because we had butchered 2. We didn't need any more. And we had all of these vegetable scraps. We gave them to the chickens. We was composting and all this stuff. And I told Wanda, I said, we've got a break in our ecosystem here. We really need to rethink our ecosystem at Deep South Homestead this year. We have the high tunnels. We have 2 of them now, possibly a 3rd one in the future. I told her, I said, the high tunnels would be really great if we had worm castings. Worm castings are probably one of the best fertilizers that you can get, and worm tea. So we began to look into purchasing some worm growing, these towers that you have the worm castings from it. Then they catch the moisture at the bottom, and you can use that for worm tea. I told her, I said, why don't we look into purchasing one for each greenhouse? And I said, if we've got the ponds and we plan on eating some fish from the ponds, then we have to have bait to be able to fish with. So I told her, I said, if we do the worms in the worm towers, we not only get the worm castings, the worm tea, we can take a few worms out occasionally to come fishing with. We don't have to buy any bait. So that's part of our ecosystem is beginning to work there. And then the vegetable scraps, some of them can be moved over and put into the worm beds to feed the worms. I mean, it's an ecosystem. We're trying to get it to where it's all working. Something that most people don't really think about when they start a homestead. We were talking about this morning, most people when they start a homestead, the first thing they do is they run out and grab animals and stuff like that, trying to get everything up, which is really, to be honest with you, is really the wrong thing to do. I went back and done some research on Thomas Jefferson, which was a famous gardener and plus a president, George Washington, president plus gardener, farmer. They were both involved in agriculture. The first things they done was planted fruit orchards when they bought their land, because it takes several years for those trees to mature. So that's the first thing they done before they got animals or before they did anything else. They bought their land, they put fruit trees in, they put nut trees in, they put all these different things in on their homestead. And that's probably something that most homesteaders never even think about, because to be honest with you, all the homesteading channels I watch, other than maybe one or two that I can think of, don't even have fruit trees that they talk about. And they don't even talk about planting a fruit orchard. Which to me is a break in the ecosystem, because when you harvest the fruit off of the trees to use for yourself, you have peelings and cores and, you know, all the waste products from it once you make your finished product out of it that could go to feed pigs or could go to feed chickens, or you know, you could feed goats with it. There's lots of things that these byproducts can be used for to benefit your homestead. Jefferson and Washington both were really big, and I'm going to discuss this more in a video I've got coming about the presidents. They were very big into the soil and to rebuilding soil. That's because back then there just wasn't the availability of fertilizers other than animal fertilizers. And the good thing about living back then was there wasn't all the chemicals in the fertilizers that you had to worry about. You didn't have any GreenStalk, Remedy, 2,4-D. All this kind of stuff was not in animal manure back then that would kill your crops. So they would, my dad used to tell me, they would clean the stalls in the barns, because he was a sharecropper, and they would take it out and they would spread it on the fields in the fall and let it sit over winter, and they would turn it in. Flat break the land and turn it in and let it lay for springtime. And because that was part of the ecosystem. The government used to, my dad told me many times, that the government, when he was sharecropping, would pay farmers to grow things like peanuts, legumes, all these types of cover crops on their fields that were nitrogen fixers, peas and stuff like this, so that it would build the soil for the next year. Today, the government does just the opposite of that. They come in and they tell you, oh, well, just spray this and spray that, and, you know, use anhydrous ammonia. You can go through there and spray that beside the corn, and, you know, they kill the ecosystem in the soil with chemical fertilizers, with toxic, literally toxic sprays, herbicides and stuff like this. And now we've got the genetically modified stuff that, you know, that's Roundup ready. You can spray the Roundup on it, don't even kill the plant, but it kills all the weeds. And oh, guys, we have destroyed the whole ecosystem. And here at Deep South, I mean, one of the things that we're striving for, now I can't use my animal manure because I don't have but 10 acres. And I don't have enough land for hay, and you can't buy hay where I live at that doesn't have GreenStalk or Remedy or one of them other 2,4-D or any of that stuff sprayed on them. It's just impossible. I have asked and asked and asked, and people just laugh at me. They're like, "You got to be kidding, right? You want hay that has weeds in it?" I said, "I got Dexter's. I don't care, you know, and they'll eat it." What? Oh, you got them little tiny cows, man. Why don't you get you some real cows? I said, Dexter's or what we love. The meat is really good. It's the best meat on the market. Their milk is A2 type milk. You know, well, you could get you a Jersey to do that with. And I'm like, yeah, but you just don't understand. Cows can live off of weeds and bushes and stuff and remain healthy. and strong. They're pretty parasite resistant and all that kind of stuff. You should look into the Dexters, is what I always tell them, and they just laugh me off and say, we'll stick with our proven breeds, and we'll keep spraying our hay. And I'm like, I said, what do y'all do with your beef? They said, we sell the grass-fed beef to everybody. I'm like, so people are eating grass-fed beef that's had Grazon sprayed all over it. I'm like, do you tell them this when they buy the grass-fed meat? Oh, well, it just passes through the cow. It don't hurt them at all. It just passes right through them, they said. And I'm like, my cows are brood cows. They're made for breeding. I don't have any yet that we're raising to eat ourselves. Hopefully, by the time I get to that point, I will have myself set up so that I will have maybe a place I can get my hay that doesn't have any Grazon or anything in it, and I'll be able to get my ecosystem going like I need it to. Guys, it's all homesteading. If you're not going to build an ecosystem on your homestead, you're just spinning your wheels. Most people go out when they start a homestead, they just try to get 1 or 2 acres, and then they load it up with goats, and they load it up with chickens and pigs and all this kind of stuff, and they're having to buy all their feed. They're not making any of their feed. I mean, the chickens can free range behind some of the other animals, but mostly they have to go out and buy their hay. They got to buy, all their feed and all this kind of stuff. They're not really sustainable, and I'm guilty of that to a point, because I only have 10 acres, and I've got I almost have a village on 10 acres, and I need more land. I'm just not going to lie to you. I need more land in order to make the ecosystem work like I want it to. But with what I've got, I'm doing my best to create that ecosystem here. I'm looking at possibly in the near future building me a nice pig pen over by the cabin in the woods over here, and get me some maybe some coons, because I can't get the Idaho pasture pigs here. They just don't sell them here. I want a really good grass-eating, non-rooting type pig. The last pigs we raised were grass eaters, and guys, the meat was amazing. The lard, when you do it on your hands, you can put lard on your hands and put it under warm water and wash it off. You don't even have to have no soap, and your hands weren't greasy. It was just amazing at the difference. We were able to feed them our vegetable scraps and stuff like this. They didn't stink. They didn't root the place up bad. It was amazing. So we're going to go back with that because it kind of keeps the ecosystem going. We take some of our vegetable scraps, we put them in with the pigs. The pigs are able to utilize the vegetable scraps, turn it in from scrap to meat. And I know there's going to be those of you out there that's going to be like, oh, but you can't eat pig. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to argue with you. I was messianic for many years and got caught up in all that. And in the food laws, I'm not going to criticize you if that's what you want to do. But in the scriptures, I will say this. The Apostle Paul said, if eating meat offends my brother, then I won't eat meat. And Paul, the comment that he was making there was, he used the word meat. When he used the word meat, he was talking about pork. He said, if eating pork offends my brother, because he wasn't talking about meat in general, because if he had, he would have specifically said pork. He said, if eating meat offends my brother, then I won't eat it. In other words, if I'm in the presence of a Jew or one of the Jews at that time, and eating pork offends my brother, then I won't eat it. I'll refrain from eating it so that it doesn't cause him to sin. Because Paul was a Gentile. He was not under the food laws that Israel was under, the Jews. So I'm not going to argue with anybody. And if I'm in your presence and we're sitting down to eat and you tell me that if I eat pork in your presence will offend you, then I won't eat it because I will refrain from it. But I'm not going to refrain from it because I believe it's a sin. Okay? I'm just going to tell you that. Now, you may fall out with me because of it. I'm not going to hold you, I'm not going to fall out with you because you believe that you shouldn't eat it. That's your right. When we stand before God, I think we'll all learn at the end, and we all have to give an account for ourselves. And that's my personal belief. So my daddy ate salt pork every day of his life up until Mama passed away and couldn't fix it for him anymore. And he lived to be 87 years old and did not die from a heart condition, or anything like that. He lived to be an old man. All my family's done the same thing. They've all lived to be old people and ate it all the time. So now I don't eat the new modern bacons and hams and stuff like that because of the sodium nitrites and all that's in it. It doesn't agree with my system. And it's not the fact that it's pork, because I eat our pork and I have no problems with that whatsoever. But I'm trying to create an ecosystem. And our forefathers knew that pigs on a homestead was part of the ecosystem. All the old homesteads, they all had hogs on them, because they turned scrap and waste material into meat that could be used. That's why we had smokehouses and we had salt places to salt meat with and all that. It's because that was a way to preserve it where it would last. And yes, I know you go, well, but pork's got the tretinoin worm in it. Well, let me throw something out there at you. All meat has worms in it, okay? Let's just get that out of the way. It all has worms in it. Fish, if you don't believe me, go catch a saltwater fish and lay it out in the hot sun. Within a few hours, there's worms on it everywhere. I mean, all meat has worms in it. It's not that one's any worse than the other. Rabbits have worms in them. Everything has worms in them. Chickens have worms in them. Chickens are nothing more than a tame buzzard. That's all they are. Chickens will eat each other. They will eat you if you lay there long enough. I mean, so you can't. I'm not going to beat a dead horse with that. I'm talking about an ecosystem. And all of this stuff on a farm or a homestead is part of the ecosystem. And we have to learn how to make that ecosystem work. Like my pear trees right now are planted, and my fig trees are planted next to my chicken pens. The roots from those trees run over to the chicken pens, and they get the nitrogen and the fertilizer from the chicken pens, and my pear trees grow and flourish. Now, I have one drawback from it. My pear trees, because of the rich nitrogen content, do get fire blight a little bit in the trees. I have to keep it pruned out, but other than that, they do perfectly fine. My muscadine vine is right down the hill from my chicken pen, and as it rains, it washes the nitrogen down to my muscadine vines, and they just flourish and do good. Guys, that's part of building an ecosystem. My mulberries are down next to the pond. Their roots, mulberries like damp, wet areas, their roots grow off down to the pond where the water's at, and they just flourish and do good. My mayhaw trees is in the bottom of a holler over here where it stays damp at. My elderberries are down in there alone, because elderberries like damp areas. You have to plant the right trees in the right places in order to guarantee their success. It's part of an ecosystem. You can't take a tree out of its natural environment that it loves to be in and put it in an environment that it doesn't like to be in and expect it to do what it's supposed to do. It's all about creating that environment and then utilizing it for the best of its ability. Now, I've gone back and I've planted many hardwood trees on our property here. I've planted a lot of the sawtooth oaks, and I've got some chestnut trees planted. If they ever get here, I have the Carpathian walnut trees to plant. We have pecan trees we have planted here. We have hazelnut trees we have planted here. And these are all not only for the animals' benefits, but they're for our benefits. We can eat walnuts, we can eat pecans, we can eat the hazelnuts, the wildlife, the deer, the cows, the pigs, all that kind of stuff can feed off of the other nuts out here, the acorn trees. We have water oaks, we have red oaks, we have a white oak. We have all of these oaks, we have hickory nuts. All the wildlife literally live off of the nut masts in the fall, and it fattens them up for the winter months. This is part of the ecosystem here that we've built here at Deep South Homestead. And I think that once we understand how an ecosystem works, and we build our homestead based on an ecosystem, it takes a lot off of us as an individual. Everybody wonders, how do you and Wanda get as much as y'all get done on your homestead? Well, the simple answer to that is an ecosystem. We don't actually have to do as much as everybody thinks that we have to do. Now, it is work, don't get me wrong. We do work from daylight to dark every day, but we work toward managing an ecosystem, and in return, the ecosystem pays us back with a healthy, bountiful harvest of everything. Now, we have our moments that we're here where we have failures and things, and every so often we'll have something that doesn't do too good. But we've learned with the high tunnels that we can overproduce anything in those high tunnels. The only drawback in the South that we have in the high tunnels is white flies. We have to fight the white flies. I'm having problems with them right now, as early in the year as it is. They've already began to hit my citrus trees, and I'm having to put the little sticky things out everywhere and try to stop them as much as possible. We'll probably be spraying some neem oil here pretty soon, which is something, I hate spraying anything, but there's points that you have to. Last year we planted 4 cucumber plants in my high tunnel. We harvested over 400 cucumbers off of 4 plants. I planted, right beside the high tunnel, I planted 5 spaghetti squash from Hall's Tool to seeds, called Small Wonder. Out of 5 seeds, we harvested 50 or 55 spaghetti squash just off of 5 little plants. Guys, when you put a plant where it needs to be, and you give it the nutrition that it needs, it will do nothing but pay you back multiple times. We planted the Celebrity Hybrid Tomato, which is the one that we have found to be outstanding. Guys, I harvested so many tomatoes last year. I left more on the vines probably at the end of the year than I harvested all year. And we gave them away by the 5-gallon buckets. We canned them. We made salsas. We made, you name it. We fed them to the animals. We done everything with those tomatoes, and they just kept bearing. Now this year, I'm going to be planting the Celebrity Hybrid again. We'll be planting the Cherokee Purples. We have those in Wanda's high tunnel there. We'll be planting some blueberry tomatoes, which is in the Indigo series of tomatoes. They turn purple, which are loaded with anthocyanins, said to be a good cancer fighter. We'll be planting the Umberto tomatoes. I am actually planting some more Amish paste for making salsas with this year. And we're trying a new variety of tomatoes from a company. It's in the Celebrity tomatoes. It's another celebrity type hybrid that even has more resistance to disease than the other ones do. So we're experimenting with those for a company that are not on the market yet. We're just experimenting with them to see how they do in our climate, so we can let the company know. All of this stuff, and people ask us, why do y'all plant so much? Well, it's part of the ecosystem. There's some for us, some for nature, some for the animals. It's what you do. If 2 tomato plants will supply you all that you need, plant 4. Because the worms are going to get to them, the blight's going to get to them, weather's going to hamper them, squirrels are going to eat a few, deer may eat a few. You gotta factor in for everything that takes place to make the ecosystem work like it's supposed to work. My garden right here in front of the cabin out here this past year, I planted a 1/4 of an acre garden right here of kale, tender greens, and turnips, and we harvested a good bit off of them to eat ourselves. But when the deer found them, they came in here, and probably within a month, they had this thing mowed down. You couldn't even tell there was a green here. But while they were here, they peed and they poop their crap all over my garden area out here, because you could just see the piles of poop all over the garden everywhere where they were at. They fertilized my garden back, and I was able to turn all that in. And guys, it's just part of the ecosystem here. You know, I mean, when I mow in a particular way, blowing my grass all toward the pond. And what it does is all the grasshoppers and all the crickets that's in the grass, they keep moving down the hill toward the pond as I make those strips. And I don't just move, I don't go back and forth like this. I mow in loops around and around, and I keep blowing everything to the outside. And then when I get down to the edge of the pond, when I make that final strip, all the grass seeds and all the crickets and the grasshoppers all fly off and land in the water, and boy, the fish just go crazy. You know, it's an ecosystem. It's making an ecosystem work. Used to, when the turkeys would come all out here, they would be lots and lots of turkeys come out on my property, and the turkeys learned I wasn't going to harm them. And when I mowed with the lawnmower, the mama turkey would bring the baby turkeys out, and they would follow along behind me on the lawnmower and get all the bugs that was jumping up out of the grass when I mowed. And that, to me, I just got the biggest kick out of watching them, you know. But, you know, every year the mama turkeys would raise right here beside my cabin over here, and they would bring all the babies out, and they would eat all the bugs on our hillside around here, because that was part of the ecosystem. And then springtime come, when the turkey season opened, if I wanted to harvest one of them, I would harvest a couple of them, and then return, they fed me back. You know, it's part of the ecosystem. And guys, as we move forward in this country, and the economy looks like it's going to, at any moment, just burst and break down, to be honest with you, I encourage everybody to grow your own food. But when you do, create an ecosystem. And I know a lot of you go, but Danny, we can't do what you do. And I totally get that. I really do. You know, because I haven't always been able to do what I'm doing. I've spent most of my life in poverty, and below the poverty level, to be honest with you. And I had to just do what I could do with a hoe, and, you know, with a tiller, or in raised beds or containers, you know, wherever I lived at. And if you're going to plant things in containers, you can still do the ecosystem. It's not a hard thing. I mean, you can plant the pollen type flowers. You can plant pollen attractors to your garden. You can attract the honeybees to your garden. You can attract the wasps to your garden. You can attract all types of pollinators to your garden by planting the right kinds of flowers. In return, certain flowers like marigolds and stuff like that deter nematodes in the soil. You can plant cover crops in the wintertime over your containers or your raised garden beds and all that kind of stuff. And in the spring, you can turn them in, put the nitrogen back into the soil. You can still do an ecosystem. You can do the worm bins. As soon as Wanda and I get the ones picked out that we want, we're going to order them and get them in here. We'll show them to you. We'll do a little review on them. And, you know, nobody's giving us this stuff. Y'all get that out of your heads. Everybody get your panties all in the wad going, oh, well, they just give y'all everything. We don't get very many things ever given to us. And most companies do not pay us anything to do the reviews that we do. We just simply do them because we like to do them to help people see things. Now, one thing about Deep South Homestead, I'm not doing a review on cheap ass junk, okay? Excuse my French, I don't do cheap ass junk. I don't go buy the $5 bulbs. I don't go do the little cheap ass stuff. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it once. My daddy raised me, son, do it once, do it right. It don't matter what it costs you. Save your money if you have to. Buy the best, you know, and that's what I do. If it offends you, I'm sorry. You can go somewhere else. No skin off my nose. I'm just telling you, I am successful at what I do because I do it to the best of my ability. And I understand people are on fixed incomes. I was so poor most of my life that I didn't even, I mean, like people said, I was so poor I had to sit on a sack of fertilizer to raise an umbrella. I mean, you know, I've heard all the stories. I've been picked at my whole life. I've lost everything I owned twice in my life. It's not like I've not been where a lot of people's been, because I have. It's just that when you have a problem, you learn from it, and you don't make that same mistake twice. Okay? So, guys, I don't want to make this any longer than it has to be. Just study ecosystems and how they work. It might be that you can do a little pond in your backyard with a pool pond, and you can use the fish emulsion from it, the fish fertilizer from it, run it through if you like to do aquaponics, you can run it through your stuff, and you can fertilize everything with your fish water. I mean, it's that easy. Just guys, just do the research, study an ecosystem, and I believe if you ever set you up a miniature ecosystem on your place, whether you're in a suburb or a small farm or a large farm, what do you think? Why do you think people like Joel Salton or Greg Judy, all these people are so successful? It's because they've learned how to have an ecosystem and how to make it work. So guys, today, study ecosystems and how to make them work for you, so that you don't spend the rest of your life struggling trying to figure out why everybody else's stuff grows and does beautiful and yours don't. When you figure the ecosystem out, things will fall into place and nature will take hold and do the work for you. Thank you guys from Deep South Homestead.